All right, so we're going to talk about actions. We're going to work our way through a simple action, a very simple action, and I'm going to build a framing action here. And then I'll take questions, and I'm going to show you sort of how this whole setup works, what the process is for building the action, but then also how to save an action, how to load an action, and so on. So we're going to start with this image here. This is actually Jay's photograph from Glacier National Park in Montana. Gorgeous spot. All right. And please let me know, by the way, if anybody has any questions as we're going through this. Feel free to just jump in. We're very casual here. Anything goes. Okay, so if you see over here on the right-hand side, I have a collection of actions listed. You have the default actions that come with Photoshop. And then I have helper macros and actions by Jay and Verena. Okay, so these are all different actions that we've built over the years that we work with. Okay, you can see sort of some of the different things we have here. Anytime we have to do a series of steps over and over again, we'll build an action that can help us get it done quickly. So if we have to prepare a series of images for a client, if we have to prepare a series of images for a show, anything like that, we both have actions for framing our images and preparing them for web display. So that's one of the actions I use most frequently. And then I have another action where I'm preparing my images for my website. So each time I finish an image, I give it a title, and then I run it through my action to prepare it for my website, and then I run it through another action to prepare it for web display, and then I'll go and I'll post it on G+, right? Okay, so let's see. In order to create a new action, okay, this is a very simple process. I'm going to select one of these folders to put it in. And then I'm going to choose this little icon at the bottom of the Actions palette, which says Create New Action. You can see it came up there. When I click on that, I get this little box that opens up. Okay, I give my action a name. I'm going to leave it as Action 1, which is kind of handy. And I'm going to record. Okay, now at this point, you see this little red dot appear. Okay, that little red dot means that we're recording. So everything I do at this point, from this point onward until I hit the stop button, which is this green square, okay, everything I do to this image will be recorded, and it'll come up on my action. Okay, it'll start to appear there. So let's go in, and the first thing I'm going to do is convert this image to a different profile, okay? Because right now it's set as Adobe RGB, and I want it for web display to be sRGB. That's the appropriate profile for most browsers. Okay, that's where the colors are going to look the best. So I just hit OK. It makes that change, and you can see that it appeared here in the Actions palette, right underneath Action 1. So that's my first step. Okay, the next step, I'm going to go in and I'm going to resize my image. Okay, so here's my File, Automate, and Fit Image. Okay, now I want it to stay within these proportions. Okay, I want it to be constrained within a 720 square. So when it shrinks down to size, it will be no wider than 720 pixels and no higher than 720 pixels. So vertical image will end up being 720 tall, and a horizontal image will be 720 wide. Okay, now I'm increasing the size of the image here, and notice that was not added to my action. Okay, when I zoom in and out on the image, it doesn't add that to my action. It doesn't assume that I really want it to do that each time. It just lets me zoom in so I can see the image at full size, and it's not an essential part of the action, and it's smart enough to know that, which is great. Okay, so at this point, I have my image at the correct size for web display, and now I want to build a small frame around it. Okay, this is actually relatively easy. I just go in, I say Image, Canvas Size, and I get this nice little box that pops up. I'm going to select the center anchor and make sure my my relative box is checked. Okay, now I want it to add a certain number of pixels to the top and bottom, left and right of the image, okay? And that's going to add whatever color I choose. I'm going to go down and I'm going to choose white here because I like my frames to be white. If it were Jay, he would make them black, but you know, I'm brightness and light and happiness, and he's evil and scary. No? Okay. Anyway, so I like the white canvas extension color, and that's what I'm going to go with. And I'll give it 40 pixels width and 40 pixels height. Now what that's going to do is increase it by 20 pixels on each side, top, bottom, left, and right. Okay, so as I do that, I click OK. There's my little border, and you can see that that's added to the action. And then I'm going to do that same thing one more time, but just a little bit differently. And this time what I want to do is adjust my canvas so that I get a little more length on the bottom, a little bit more border down here on the bottom. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm selecting the top anchor and I'm increasing just my height. Okay, this time I want to add another 20 pixels to my height. I don't want to add anything to the width, just to the height. And there it is. So I've got a little extra on the bottom. Okay, once again, there it is on my action. And I'm going to go and I'm going to type my name in there. Okay, now I can choose whatever color I like. Choose black. And I can choose my my font. Then I can type my name or my title or whatever it is, right? And I can move it around a little bit if I want to. Okay, and then I'm going to be done with this action. Okay, and I'm going to hit that stop button. Now, every time I create, every time I run this action, those steps are going to be followed through. Okay, so I can show you what happens here. I'm going to close up my action, select it, and I'm going to take my history and go all the way back to the original image. Okay, there it is. All right, now I'm going to zoom in so I'm at 100% so you can see what's happening. Oops, there it is. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my actions palette. When I click on action 1, I can use this little green play button, which is the arrow. It says play selection. When I click it, watch what happens. There it is. Okay, now I can do this with any image in my collection. I can pull up 15 images one after another, and it will build that frame and prepare this image for the web that quickly. And now I can add to this action if I want. All right, I can open it up. Can select my last section of the action. What? My last action? Step, thank you. My last step. Let's say I want to delete it. I don't want it to do that. Okay, I'm just going to click it and drag it into the trash can. Okay, now I also have options to add another step, and if I want to do that, I need to push the record button again. So here I am, begin recording. Okay. And I'm sorry?
Change it to 8-bit.
Yeah. So I can, in this case, actually, Jay, I can't change it to 8-bit because it's already 8-bit, so it won't show up in my action. If it were a 16-bit image, I could add that step, as Jay suggested. I could go in and I could tell it to convert it to 8 bits. But since it's already converted to 8 bits, it won't do it. Okay? It won't add it to my action because it's already been done. So it's not a good example in this case. But I can do all kinds of other things. I can go in and you know, I can change the color. I can add a layer, a black and white layer. How about that? Make an adjustment here, and it will automatically add that adjustment layer that I just created to my action. And there are all the parameters you can see there, okay, that I set when I made that adjustment layer. This may not be the best black and white conversion you've ever seen, but since I'm doing it quickly, I hope you'll forgive me. But notice that as I click that little arrow, all that information shows up, okay? And at this point, I'm going to stop my action again, and I'm going to close down that adjustment layer so you don't see all the details. Now you can see all the steps, and you can click on those arrows to show the specific changes that you've made. Okay, this is really useful. Now the other thing that you can do is tell it to change one part of the action. Okay, so now that I've already created an action, what if I say, you know what, I don't want my image to be this size, I want it to be smaller. I can go in and click on this Fit Image step. Notice that I get the box, but I've also turned on the record button and the play button. Okay, so that means that not only am I recording a new step, but it's also going to do it to the image that I'm working on now. Okay, so instead of 720, let's say I want 700 by 700. Okay, so there it is. It just resized that image. Okay, and notice that it has stopped my recording automatically. Okay, it's not going to continue to record what I'm doing now because it already, because I was just making a change to one step. Okay, and there it is. When I drop down the menu, you can see that I have 700 pixels now instead of 720. Okay, so that's how you change an action. Now at this point, I have an action, but what if Jay wants the same action on his computer? Okay, we do this all the time. Jay and I share actions. He'll build an action that's really useful. I'll say, hey, I want that, and he'll send it over to me. I'll make some tweaks to it. I'll change it so it's how I like it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do is, I can't just give it to him. I have to email it to him or send it to him somehow, right? So what I need to do is go to this little drop-down menu, and I'll say Save Action. Where is that? Oh, it's already in there. Sorry. What I have to do is actually click on the folder. I always forget that. Somebody's giving me some feedback there. If you could turn off your microphone, that would be great. All right, thank you. Okay, so I need to click on the folder that contains my action. Okay, so not the action itself, but the actual folder it's contained within. Then I use the drop-down menu, and I choose Save Actions. And it opens it up. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it Actions by Jay and Verena. I'm going to hit Save. Now at this point, I can go in and I can email it to Jay. Okay, now all he needs to do at that point is open up Photoshop, click on his Actions palette, use the same drop-down menu and say Load Actions. And up it'll come. He can find it right there on his desktop where he stored it after I emailed it to him. And it'll appear in his collection of actions. Okay, it's very, very simple. We actually create actions, and we have shared several of those with our Google Plus fans and people on our blog, and all those actions are available. You know, black frame, white frame. We have several of them that are available, and that's how it works. You go in, you download the file, you save it somewhere on your system, and then you go in and use that little drop-down menu and load actions. Okay, so I think that is about it. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Feel free to just jump right in or type into the text box too.
So Verena and Jay, with this you can also do batch actions as well. So if you want to do an entire folder, you can add that.
So yes, you can do batch actions, and the way it works is you can actually run an action from Bridge. And so if you're going to the Bridge, as Verena has shown you, under Tools, so you select the number of files you want, and then under Tools, you go in, and under Photoshop, you can actually go to the batch. And if you click on the batch, it will ask you for what action you want to run on this. And then you can select the folder the action was in, and then from the folder, you can select which action you want to run. So if you want to run action 1, you can run action 1, and what it'll do is it'll open the file and run all those actions on the files that you have selected. So it's actually very easy to create a batch process. You can also do this from Photoshop too, I believe, but much easier to do it from Bridge. At least that's what we find.
So over the summer, we photographed my brother's wedding. After the wedding was over, we had all these files to process, and when we prepare files for the bride and groom, we go in and we open up 1,000 files. Now, is it possible to go in and create a frame on each of those files so that they can have thumbnails to send out to their friends, or not even a frame, but just shrink them down so they can post them on Facebook, on G+, on their blog? That would take forever. So instead, we go in, we create the action, and then we run it, and we just leave it running. Doesn't take very long. It'll run it through all those thousands of images and get it done for us. So this is an excellent, excellent tool, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. When you're creating the actions and you figure you're doing steps 1 to 3, but then you want to move the steps, like step 4, you want to do it sooner, you can edit that easy by just moving it, or how does that work?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't catch the first part.
If I
Okay,
have
sorry, Marina got.
I understood the question, so I'll go ahead and answer it. If you take a look at the action here, I think what you were asking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I think what you were asking is if I could go in and say, I have my action here and I want to adjust the image size after I adjust my canvas, for example.
Correct, yeah.
So what I can do is select that step, move it where I want it. And you can see I just did that with the fit image option. I can put it wherever I like, which is really useful. One of the other things that I can do is actually turn on or off, turn on or off a certain step. Okay, and you can see I'm just doing that by clicking a check mark. Why would you want to use that? A lot of times I want my action to save my image in a special location. But sometimes I don't want it to do that. So I'll go in and I will actually run the action with that little check mark turned off, and that way it doesn't automatically save. Maybe I want to make a change to it. Maybe I'm not happy with how the action runs because I have for this specific image a specific need. Okay, so then I can turn off one step or another. Maybe I don't want it to put my name on it, and I can remove that text layer. When I run the action the next time, it won't put that text layer there. It will just leave it blank. Then maybe I don't want to save it either because I want to put some other text in there. I can go in, put the text in manually, and then save it on my own. Okay. The other option is to stop the action at a certain point. Okay. Now, if I click on this little box here, you can see I can toggle on and off this little tool. And when it comes up, it says toggle dialog something. I don't know what it says. Let's see if it'll pop up for me again. Now it won't. Anyway, it's toggling something to do with the dialog on and off. What is it? Toggle item on and off. There we go. Item on and off. And no, that's the other one. It's this one. Come on. There it is. Toggle dialog on and off. So what I can do is I can tell it to stop at that point during the action. Why would I want to do that? In this case, I can tell it to go in and type Verena Patel, but then wait. That way I can go in and change it each and every time. I can say, well, I want to put the title there, not my name, right? And the title's going to be different every time. So if I can tell it to stop at that step, I can go in, I can put my own title in, and then hit play, and it'll keep going through the rest of the action. And that's really useful for people who want to put their title in that frame box. I see a lot of people doing that, and that's a really useful way to do it. Any other questions?
So let me explain something else that you may or may not have thought about. There is no way you can make a decision in an action. So there is no step that says if then, right? So one of the challenges while creating actions is that vertical and horizontal images, the positioning doesn't work very well. So the only way you can actually do a positioning with vertical and horizontal images is to do what we call relative positioning. That means you can actually position one layer relative to another layer. And that requires a bit of sophistication and a bit of thinking about how the relative positioning works. So when you first start doing that, start thinking about relative positioning of your images, and then you'll be able to create very sophisticated actions. The other way you can get around that if then action step is to be able to use script like Marina used, fit image script. So fit image script will constrain the proportions of the image to the maximum size. And you can use the number of these fit images in your actions to be able to get around if then limitations. I'm hoping that over the years Adobe will think about putting a what you call a decision-making tool in the action. That would help a lot of people and do a lot of things.
So to add to that a little bit, when would you want to use something like that? When I first built an action like this, a framing action, I actually had it set up so that for horizontal images I used one action, and for vertical images I used another action. Now, the reason I did that is because I wanted to make sure that my images were always the correct size, and I didn't know about that little fit image tool, and so I would go in and say image size, and I would adjust it this way, okay? And I would tell it specifically what my width and height would be. Well, that works really well if all your images are the same size. But if you want them, and the same shape more specifically, so if it's a horizontal image, it'll always work. But if I go in and I convert my vertical image, I'm going to get a really big image. If I want my width to be 700 for vertical image, it's going to be much taller. Okay, so it doesn't work as well. So that's why we use that that automate fit image option. It allows us to use the same action for both horizontal and vertical images. It works out really well. And then Jay's other example had to do with positioning text layers. And if you recall, I had actually gone in and moved my text around, right? I can tell it using certain parameters where I want that text to be placed. Okay, and we're not going to go into that now because it gets too in-depth, but I can tell it to center it, I can tell it to align it with the bottom of the frame, or I can tell it to align it to a certain position within the frame. Okay, now if I can do that, I can make it very clear where I want that image, where I want that layer, regardless of the shape of my finished image or my frame.
All right, any questions?
No, thank you. This was really good.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Katie?
What does it look like when you stop the action? Say, for example, if you wanted to put the titles on the frame. So does it just stop at that action and then you put the text you want in and then it goes again?
I can run it for you and I can show you exactly what happens. I'm going to go once again back to the original file. I'm going to go into my action and I'm going to tell it to stop on the text layer. Click on the action, click run. It'll run through the first series of steps, and there's my name that comes up. You'll notice it stopped at this point, and I can go in and I can tell it, oops, this isn't my file, this is Jay's file. It is Jay's file. And then I can say, here's my little checkbox up here on the right. You can click the checkbox and it'll run through the rest of the action.
Oh my God,
okay.
Okay.
Also at this point, I might recommend if you're creating your own action to tell it to flatten your image and save it. Maybe save it for web. Okay, so there are a lot of other things you can add to it. I just wanted to show a very brief, basic action so that you get the general idea. Okay, but did that help? Did that answer your question?
I was just wondering if it prompted you to change the text or something, you know, had a prompt box or something.
Yeah, you can actually add a prompt box as well. I think we won't go into that either because I think it gets too detailed, but there are ways that you can add a prompt box and it'll come up and say, you know, enter your whatever. It'll tell you exactly what it wants you to do. So if you have an action that you're giving away or you want somebody else to be able to use it too, they might need little more information than they can get just from the
Right.
screen coming up for them.
Right. So, for example, you wanted to do this action and send it to your share it with your Google Plus followers. You could put the prompt box in with the text and it say, enter your text here.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
The prompt box would go actually before the text, so it'll say that in the next
Right.
step, please enter your text, and that's how
Right.
it works. You can also stop the actions and let users do some other things and then continue the actions from that person. So you can see that one of the things that says insert stop. So you can actually force a stop and let the users do other commands and then continue the action from that.
Right.
So
And that's what she was doing.
correct.
Yeah.
So that would be very similar if you want to put a stop in to do some, say, blending options on text or on the image itself, if you wanted to put inner or outer or embossing, where you could put a stop action and then have each photo done kind of independently.
Yeah, absolutely. You can stop it anywhere you like and have it do whatever you want it to do. Yep.
The other useful thing about this stop, insert stop, is once you're creating an action, if it gets really long, you want to debug an action, you can insert a stop and then see exactly what step it is messing up on. So you can insert it if the action has, say, 50 steps and it runs through your history file and you don't have access to that, you can insert a stop and say, okay, what is it doing? And then you can move the stop around and check each step to make sure that it's the correct, what it's doing, what it's supposed to do. Make sense?
Yeah.
It's the same thing you used to do when you were programming. I don't know how many of you have any programming experience, but when programmers write code, they'll go in and they will stop the program at some point, force it to stop, just in order to figure out where the bug is. I mean, they're constantly trying to weed out the bug in 1,000 or 1,000,000 lines of code, and that's a simple way to get it to stop where you want it to stop. And then you can throw away that stop. You just grab it and, oops, sorry, double clicked it. You can just grab it and throw it in the trash when you're done with it and go from there. Okay, the trick is if you're going to make changes to the action, you need to make sure that you select the folder that the action is in and save it again. Okay, every time you change it, changing it will not automatically save it, so you'll need to save it again. Okay. Also, make sure that when you update your system, when you get a new computer, that you update, that you go and you save all your actions and take them with you to your new system. Not that I've ever not done that or anything. But yeah.
I haven't done it.
Of course not. He has to. All right, so I think that's it. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm glad you guys could all come out.